All right, here's our second lesson in Chapter 0. It's all about comparing and ordering decimals. So go ahead and follow along in your notes and make sure to copy all the examples. To compare decimals, we must first make them the same place value by adding the hidden zeros. So we talked about hidden zeros and where they can go in Lesson 1, and now we're going to be putting that into practice here in Lesson 2. Also, when ordering negative numbers, the smallest number is farther away from 0 on the number line. We talked about that in the prerequisite stuff with the negatives. Remember, if it looks bigger, it's actually smaller, or the smaller number is farther away from 0 on the number line. So let's go ahead and see an example. First, we have our list of numbers: 8 and 9/10, 8 and 15/100, 9, 8, 9 and 9/100, and 9 and 9/10. So we're putting these numbers in ascending order, and ascending means least to greatest. So we're looking for the smallest number up there first. So when I look at these numbers, I'm going to focus on the whole numbers first. And I've got 3 numbers with an 8 in the ones place. 8 and 9/10, 8 and 15/100, and 8. And remember what we talked about in Lesson 1. We can add zeros without changing the value of the number in order to get these all to be the same place value. So in my first number, I've got the 10th place. In my second number, I'm going to the 100th place. In my third number, I'm stuck at the ones place. So what I want to do is get them to all be my 100th place, like my 15/100 right here. So I can add a 0 after the 8 and 9/10. I don't have to add any zeros here, and I can add 2 zeros after my 8. Now each of those 3 numbers is in the 100th place value. So once I have my place values all the same, I'm looking for my smallest number. Remember, ascending means least to greatest. And 0/100, 15/100, 90/100. Well, which one of those is the smallest decimal piece? It's 0/100. So my smallest number in my list is the number 8. Notice I didn't write it with my zeros in the final answer. I cleaned up those zeros to get it back into the numbers that were given to me in the problem. All right? So now I've got 15/100 and 90/100. Well, 15/100 is less than 90/100 because 15 is less than 90. So 8 and 15/100 will be my next number, and that means that 8 and 9/10 is going to be the next number in my list. Again, I'm cleaning up that 0 to write it in my final answer. So to keep going with my ascending order, now all my whole number 8s are done, so I can move to my 9s. I've got a 9, I've got a 9 and 9/100, and I've got 9 and 9/10. Again, adding my hidden zeros to make them all the same place value. I want to make it as long as my longest number here, so I'm going to go to the 100th place again. I'll add 2 zeros, and I'll add 1 0 down here. So 9 and 0/100, 9 and 9/100, 9 and 90/100. 0/100 is going to be my smallest of those 3 numbers. 9/100 is going to come next. And 90/100 will be my largest number up there. Remember, when I write my final answer, I clean up those hidden zeros that I added in order to compare them. All right, so there is my final answer with all my numbers in ascending order and all my zeros cleaned up. Let's take a look at number 11. Put the numbers in descending order. So now I'm looking for my largest number and working to my smallest number. And this is kind of a tricky one because they're all negatives. So I'm looking for the number that is largest. So I'm looking for the number that's going to be closest to 0 to get started. All right, so right here, as I look at my whole numbers, I've got -5, -5, -5. Those are my 3 biggest numbers. Let's underline them. And I'm going to write them down: -5 and 5/10, -5 and -5 and 5/100. Let's add my hidden zeros. to make them all the hundredths place. Okay, and the biggest of those numbers is the one that's going to be closest to 0. All right, so we've got -5 and 50 hundredths, 0 hundredths, 5 hundredths. Closest to 0 is going to be this 0 hundredths. So my largest number is -5. I'm going to clean up those zeros that I added here. Next, again, I'm looking for the number closest to 0, 5 hundredths and 50 hundredths. Well, 5 hundredths is closer to 0, so that's the next largest number. And then -5 and 50 hundredths. Clean up the 0 and I get -5 and 5 tenths. Now the numbers that are left, I've got -7, -8 and 8 tenths, -8 and 1 tenth. Again, I'm looking for the number closest to 0, looking for my largest number right now, largest number in the negatives. So that's going to be my -7. I'm just going to clear up some space here to keep going. Now I have my two numbers with the -8 in the ones place. And I've got -8 and 8 tenths, -8 and 1 tenth. They both are in the tenths place, so I don't have to add any hidden zeros. What's closer to 0 is the -8 and 1 tenth. That's my biggest number left at this point. And that means of all the numbers up there, the smallest number is -8 and 8 tenths. Right, so this is my list in descending order. This is a tricky one because we're trying to do it kind of in reverse of what you would think. It's greatest to least instead of least to greatest. Okay, go ahead and check out your practice problems and then check your answers in Schoology.